And now, it's time to break down the Cougars.
Give me everything you got right now.
This is your Cougars Daily Update with JJ and Alex on 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone.
I don't know. I mean, there's less Olympics to watch, so maybe we'll give you guys something to think about. I think those have to happen naturally. It's not going to be anything that we can force feed or create a deadline on. So we've been through quarterback competitions before. I think when it's right, then we'll be able to announce it. But right now, it's not the time.
Welcome back to the program. JJ and Alex, 97.5 the KSL Sports Zone. Alex Curie, Jeremiah Jensen, thanks for being with us on the show. And, of course, yes, anything that comes out of camp down in Provo, up on the hill, out of Logan, we'll bring you that sound as soon as we get it. We've been doing it all camp for all the teams here locally. And joining us right now on the program, always a treat to have the voice of the Cougs on with us. He is Greg Wrubell. What's up, Wrubell? How are things, man? We don't want to get to chat all that often these days.
I'm pleased as punch to be joining you. It's a great day in the thunderstorm-laden Utah Valley right now. It's pouring down here, but I love the late afternoon thunderstorms. It seems like we endure the hot, windy, sunny days for months on end, and it's nice to get some rain and a little storm action. It's a nice change of pace.
We all need to cool off, and I'm sure down in Provo, if they're practicing in the evening, they'll appreciate that as well, as the Cougars are now in the third week at camp. Just an overall, obviously we'll hit quarterback and everything. I just want to get your overall thoughts so far on what you've seen at camp and what your observations are that you think are of most interest to BYU football fans.
Yeah, and by the way, they went morning today, actually. The session today was it was a morning day, a rare morning day. So they actually got a cool, nice kind of cloud-covery morning to work with, so it was kind of a nice break for those guys, too. I think really one of the most positive things that BYU fans can take out of camp so far, and it's only been 2 weeks, guys, but it seems like so frequently you hear, after the first couple of weeks or first scrimmage that, something serious has happened to an important player, and that hasn't happened yet. Knock on wood for BYU fans, they've had a relatively healthy camp, and that's despite amping up the physicality and playing a lot of tackle football. I mean, Aaron Roderick's pretty adamant that they need to be a better run-push football team, and they've been working hard on that. And so I think one of the best things to come out of the first couple of weeks is we haven't had to talk about or hear from Kalani or his coaches about any season-ending, long-term type injury situations. And that to me is one of the biggest challenges of every camp, is just getting through 4 weeks of hard-hitting football with the group you want to start game one. And so far, so good on that front.
We were talking about, speaking of injuries and question marks and things like that, and one thing that was brought up, because everyone's been kind of wondering what L.J. Martin's status was, and A-Rod brought up that, he's cleared, he's going. We're being smart about it. Where's L.J. Martin on the on the development side of things? Because this is one part of BYU's game that, one, we're excited to see changes on the scheme, and the talent's there at running back. The question is, where does Falau Rapati fit in? Where does Miles Davis fit in? Where's L.J. Martin going to be in all that? And then how has T.J. Wood's scheme, kind of changed overall from offensive line to the running back situation? How should BYU fans feel about this run game this year?
Well, LJ's right on pace. I mean, there's no worries. I mean, they were easing him in through the first couple of weeks, but that was always the plan. So the plan was to get him ready for game one, and he's on pace, and so that's a positive thing. I think you go into game one with LJ Martin, Hinckley Ropati, Miles Davis, and Pokai Honga probably as your 1, 2, 3, 4 at running back. And that's a pretty good group to start the season. There are others as well. With Sione Moa and Enoch Navahine, there are other guys there, but I think if you had to press me for a top 4 right now, that's your group, and I don't think there should be any long-term worries about LJ. I really do think he's pacing for what the team wanted to do, which was get him ready for the opener, and so I don't think there's a lot to worry about in that respect. And as to how the scheme changes between Coach Funk to Coach Woods, let's wait and see what it all turns out to look like. A-Rod, I think, last night spoke well when he said, I'd like to project how the offensive line is going to perform, but it's all just talk right now. Last year's offensive line was supposed to be pretty darn good, and it was surprisingly struggled in the run game. The fellow who produces the Pick Six Previews publication just 2 years ago, in 2021, had BYU as a top 25 run push team in judging the O-lines, and that number dropped to 123rd by last season. So They really struggled for those early down yards, the quote unquote easy yards you want to get to set up your second and third downs. And so this team will have to be a lot better in the run game up front, and A-Rod knows it. That's why A-Rod's working on it, but A-Rod's hesitant to project too much until we see it. He said multiple times yesterday, I can tell you anything, but I need to see it in a game. Let's see how it all looks in not just the opener because it's an FCS game, but in games 2 and 3 and in the Big 12 play. I do think there's a pretty solid 6, 7, maybe even 8 guys for those 5 spots up front. And I think 4 of the offensive line spots you probably feel pretty good about going in as more or less locked in. I don't want to say it's they're 100% starters, but I think if you said Etienne, Lapuaho, Pay, and Keim as 4 pretty, penciled in starters, you'd be pretty solid right there. Then you're looking, for 1, 2, or 3 other guys, for that last spot. And likely right guard's going to be a good battle between Sonny Makasini and Austin Leausa and Trevin Ostler. Leausa can also play outside on the edge, so maybe Leausa has some competition time at tackle as well. Again, I like 7, maybe 6 to 8 guys for those 5 spots. And I like A-Rod. I'm curious to see how it all comes together when they start, taking snaps that really matter.
Obviously, there's a lot of focus and attention on the quarterback situation, and for good reason. Is there any concern? Should fans be concerned that it's taken this long for separation to happen or not happen yet? Any concern at all that this is taking more than 3 weeks to figure out?
Well, they're 2 weeks into 4 the way I look at it, right? And so they're halfway through. And I think once you get past the halfway mark, that's when you might begin to see a little separation. And I think within the next week, A-Rod will see what he needs to see. The players will see what they need to see. Again, I'm kind of referencing what Coach Roderick said yesterday after practice, which was the team kind of all knows it. And when we all get to the same conclusion, that's when it's time to make an announcement. Gary Bohannon, we can't, understate the amount of experience he has. I mean, he's been playing college football for a long time. He's from 2018 to 2024 has seen a lot of football and taken a lot of meaningful reps. He's got a Sugar Bowl win. He's got a conference championship as a starting quarterback. He's taken a ton of meaningful reps with starts. He's a 1,000-yard career rusher, for heaven's sake. I mean, he's got a lot under his belt. And so if that arm looks good and that shoulder's feeling right and he's slinging it, why would you not expect a guy like Gary Bohannon to try and grab that job? Now, do I think they're going to need both guys? Probably so, because almost every team does, including BYU guys. They didn't get through last year without 2, and it's unlikely that most teams get through a season without 2. And so Jake Retzloff and A-Rod does call it a two-man. It's a two-man fight right now, so let's kind of narrow it to those 2 guys. I think both guys will be needed. Both have had a lot of reps with the ones. Both have done well. And I think if you had to look for one guy to have an inside track just because of all the things I just mentioned, and then you throw on top of it the fact that he's 2 inches taller, he's 20 pounds heavier. Gary Bohannon, they brought him in for a very specific reason. I mean, he's got to empty the tank this year. This is his last year to play. Jake Retzloff still has a lot of football in front of him. So there are a lot of reasons you can kind of cobble together to say you won't be surprised if Gary wins the job. If Jake wins the job, he'll have had a heck of a camp and had to look really good because of everything Gary brings to the table. So I think either way, A-Rod will have chosen a quality QB for game 1. But I'll reiterate, it may not be one guy's job all year long. That's usually just not the way it works in college football.
From a historical standpoint, and Greg, you're one of the best historians of the game, especially when it comes to BYU. The quarterback battle stuff we've seen before. We've covered it before. Is there one that's comparable to this? I mean, I know that the recency side of it brings us to talk about Zach Wilson and Jaron Hall, which is what A-Rod brought up in practice. But per your view and some of those quarterback battles that you've seen, is it usually that close? I mean, when they talk about these things and they talk about having to see separation, because they've had these battles before, and sometimes we forget that they'll make that decision a few days even before games.
Yeah, I don't know if I can draw an immediate historical comparison beyond the one that Coach Roderick did last night because of how they went into camp without a defined starter. A lot of years you do go into August knowing who the man is. And I don't think it's a situation where that old cliche came from where if you have two, you don't have any. I really don't think it's like that. I think what they needed to see was if Gary Bohannon could be back to 2021 and early 22 Gary Bohannon. You bring him in, you ease him through a spring. You don't see all of him in spring. But if by August, he's the guy that was throwing the football in 21 and 22, you've got a heck of a quarterback. And I think Jake Retzlaff, because of what was thrown on his plate last year and the quality reps he was asked to take and the way he brought the team through the end of the season and through spring, is given every chance to go prove that with the ones he looks good too. I guess I just don't have the worry about, well, it hasn't happened yet, so they must really not like what they see. I think they like what they see from both guys. And I think both guys have gotten plenty of snaps behind the number one offensive line. I just don't know that because one guy is the guy, that's going to be the only guy we report on this season. Again, it's the exception rather than the rule that you get those years where a guy is a 13-game starter. It just doesn't happen too frequently at all. There was a Zach Wilson year in 2020 we talked about, and there was a Taysom Hill year, maybe 2013. And other than that, you're going over a decade plus, where it takes multiple quarterbacks to get through a season. And last year, things didn't turn out the way that BYU hoped with Keaton Slovis. When he was healthy, the numbers weren't quite what you hoped. And then once he got dinged, they just began to slip and slide. And that's why the change was made to Jake to begin with. So it's a rare season where your guy is the guy. And so I think both guys have to be really good is what I'm getting to.
Just as important as the quarterback position is the quarterback rush on the defensive side. Maybe not talked about enough, but an area that BYU really needs to improve on in the second year of Jay Hill's defense. Do you feel like they have the personnel there to turn that corner this season?
Tyler Batty is a known commodity. Same too with Isaiah Banya. Logan Lutui, I think, has looked good. Bodie Schoonover is a name. Ephraim Asiata, Viliama Puuha. There's 6 names that just dropped on you, and between those 6, you're going to find probably a top 4, if not 5, to rotate. And BYU defensive lines do love to rotate both outside and inside. And that's where we're going to look, right, guys, to see where steps have been taken, because, we discussed the disruption numbers, the havoc numbers, and that's a huge area of improvement that Jay Hill has targeted. That half step that Hans Olsen talks about between a hurry and a sack. Can they bump those numbers? All the disruption numbers BYU put up last year were lesser than those of their opponents, whether it's hurries or sacks or tackles for loss, passes broken up, INTs. It was a struggle to keep pace with the opponent in terms of those disruption numbers. If that can come up demonstrably in those different categories, the overall defense will show an improvement. I thought the secondary last year did a heck of a job with what they had to work with not maybe enough disruption happening up front. And if they're just a little better in pressure, a little better at stopping plays for loss, a little better at keeping negative plays a little more predominant, it'll only help the secondary, which I think looks good too, with Micah Harper returning and Talon Alfrey returning and a Robinson Mamba duo. Mark Collins comes in. There's a lot of reasons to feel good right now about those top-line players. How healthy can they stay? How long can they stay ones is the question, and that seems to be always the question in college football is, at what point do you start having to go down to your 2s and 3s and see it affect BYU? I think we saw it last year because that 10-game grind, guys, that 10 straight P5 things for the first time ever, that was a real thing. And it felt like the war of attrition began to be kind of lost after a few games, and it took them a while to gain their footing. And when they did, they actually had a chance to win a couple of really important games that didn't go their way against both Oklahoma and Oklahoma State. But the fight was there, and the learning curve was displayed in terms of what it takes to get through 10 consecutive P5 opponents in a given season.
Something that I think is interesting, Greg, is how much that the athletics department and how much that they've focused on making sure that fan experience and everything has been dialed up even more going into the Big 12. What's the fan experience going to be like this year compared to, I don't know, like 10 years ago, for example, when somebody went to the game? My kids are season ticket holders, and so it's a big deal for them to go to these things. And it just seems like that in 2024, football in person and at Lavelle Edwards Stadium has gotten insanely fun, and but they're dialing. They have to compete with everything else. Everything's a show now.
Well, it is a show, and over the last decade, 10 years ago, the fan experience department didn't exist, and now every school basically has a fan experience department, and the experience for fans nowadays at BYU is it's top notch, it's high level, and they added the LED lights this year, which will bring a whole new aspect to the experience, with the ability to turn the lights on and off and bring in the rainbow of colors into Lavelle Edwards Stadium. It's going to look and feel and sound a little different this year as it becomes, more and more showy. It kind of follows the trend of everything we're seeing in the world of collegiate athletics getting more and more like the pro game, right? And I look forward to how it's all going to appear on a late Friday or Saturday night in what is already a tremendous setting for football. And it's tough to do much better with the natural setting you've got. Then you bring in the artificial enhancements, and that fan experience just gets more and more ramped up. And the revenue side kind of demands it. The more you ask for those seats, the better the product has to be, both on and off the field, and that's where BYU's going.
Is it possible BYU's much better this season, but the difficult schedule makes it hard to see just how much better they are? How difficult is this slate for them in the Big 12?
Yeah, JJ, to answer your point, I think it's difficult enough that just getting to a bowl game means you're a heck of a team this year. And some people say, you're low. Some people are saying that's a low bar. For this year and this year's team and this year's schedule, I don't think it is a low bar. I think if you've won 6 games with this schedule, you're a really good football team. Anything beyond that, would be tremendously encouraging. But I think finding a way to get 6 wins with this schedule, you look at the top 25 poll that came out yesterday, right? And BYU's got all those teams on the schedule. Now, to help the Cougars, they get 4 of them at home. The only one they play away is Utah. But, of the 5 quote-unquote best teams in the Big 12, based on preseason prognostications, the Cougars have to go through all of them. And then when you go out of league, and you have to go to an SMU team returning one of its best offensive groups in years, if not decades, even a trip to Laramie can't be overlooked. Ask Texas Tech from last year. So it's full of landmines, and if you get to a postseason in this season, I think BYU's had a heck of a season. That's what I'm going to stay with.
Greg Wrubell, the voice of the Cougars, on the program here with us. Have you ever gotten the peripheral, I guess because our colleague Hans Olsen, he's a passionate man, and he stands during the broadcast, as you well know. Have you ever gotten the I wouldn't even call it accidental, but like the excited punch to the arm that maybe, I don't know, killed you for the next week, or the random hug that you might get from Hans that has been known to break some ribs from time to time?
So most of the hugs that I get with Hans are pre or post game, because by the way we set up in the booth, we have a person between us.
And that's by design, right?
Yeah, our spotter is the human buffer zone. And so the spotter takes the brunt of the punishment, whether Hans from his left or me from his right. The spotter gets all the hits on the arm, because in a basketball situation, for example, when I sit next to Mark Durant, there's no one between us, and Mark takes the hits from me all game long. So that's what does happen. Your partners hit each other. It's a thing that happens. But luckily for me, unluckily for our spotter, he's right between Hans and myself, and so he bears the brunt of all the happy punishment. Let's put it that way. But yeah, no, I'm so looking forward to another season with Hans. We had the opportunity to get at dinner last night with a bunch of great BYU fans, and we got to get ourselves all kind of pumped up for the season. It's going to be great to be back in the booth with him again. And yes, he does stand the entire game. I sit and stand, do a bit of both. But Hans has all that nervous energy. He just loves to have that bird's eye view all game long. And I love what he brings to the booth, love what he brings to the broadcast, and I hope we're together for a long time.
You got to put a helmet and shoulder pads on that spotter. You can't afford to lose him for the season.
Now he's got to, I'm sure they have to go through their own preseason regimen just to be ready for the abuse they're about to take over the next 3 months.
What are those? You put the Guardian cap on him.
There you go.
Get him going throughout the rest of the season. So, Greg, we're looking forward to another great season, and we'll chat with you when some games have gotten underway, and we'll get your thoughts on how things are going then. Thanks tremendously for joining us again today.
Alex Jeremiah, really enjoyed it. Thank you. Ask anytime.
Thanks, Greg. You're the best.
There's Greg Wrubell, everybody.
He's right. Can't wait for another season. Him and Hans are just tremendous.
It is. So Greg's also because the glass is in front of him. It's actually better because if you throw he does the pen throw. He does the pen
I've
throw
seen
too.
the pen throw.
And
I've witnessed it.
Yeah, it's like, and they're short on third down. And if you listen, you got to listen on the broadcast very, very intently, and you can hear just a mild click. It's actually a hard throw against the thick glass at LaVell Edwards Stadium. So there you go. And it is a fun thing to watch too when you see all of Ralph Sokolowski's Post-it notes that he puts on the glass too of all the stats that he has in front of him there, and Greg goes through and he'll pick and choose. He'll be like, no, I didn't like that one. Yep, love this one. I'll use it. And it's a process to watch. So, and Hans is doing a phenomenal job. I mean, obviously you knew he would right off the bat.
Dream team.
All right, we'll take a break.